My name is Rosalie and I am 29 years old. Christmas used to be my favorite day of the year. The one night when our fractured family pretended we were whole again, when laughter filled the spaces that were otherwise occupied by silence and unresolved grudges, when for a few fragile hours I could almost believe I still belonged somewhere. That illusion shattered the moment I stepped into my mother's dining room that night. The house glowed with warm golden lights, the tree shimmered in the corner, and the table overflowed with food prepared with obsessive care. Yet beneath the surface everything felt cold, rehearsed, wrong. I sensed it in the way conversations paused when I entered, in the tight smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes, in the subtle but unmistakable reminder that I was present yet not truly welcome. Still, I took my seat, trying to ignore the tension tightening around my chest, telling myself I was imagining things. Dinner unfolded with forced cheerfulness. My cousins exchanging stories, my uncle boasting loudly, my mother playing the gracious host, but something about the energy felt like a performance staged for everyone except me. Then came the gifts. My mother stood beside the tree, radiant, calling out names with theatrical enthusiasm. Boxes were passed around, ribbons torn, delighted gasps filling the room. One by one, everyone received something carefully chosen. Something thoughtful, something that signaled they were seen and valued. I waited, smiling politely, my heart pounding with a strange mix of hope and dread. Convinced my turn would come, it didn't. The pile disappeared, laughter crescendoed, wrapping paper littered the floor, and my hands remained empty. The realization crept in slowly, painfully, until it was impossible to ignore. I looked at my mother, expecting confusion, a forgotten package. Some explanation that would rescue me from the humiliation creeping up my spine. Instead, she met my gaze with a detached calm that froze me. At Christmas dinner, Mom gave everyone gifts. I got nothing. She said, "Be grateful you can sit here." The words didn't just sting. They landed with the weight of something long planned, long felt. A silence rippled outward, thick and suffocating, before my uncle leaned back in his chair with a smirk that I had seen too many times before. My uncle chuckled and said, "Be glad we still remember your name." Everyone laughed. The sound was sharp, echoing, unreal, like glass breaking inside my skull. In that instant, every insecurity I had ever buried clawed its way to the surface. I felt small, exposed, erased. I searched their faces for discomfort, for someone to recognize the cruelty of the moment. But all I found were amused expressions and deliberate avoidance. Something inside me shifted then, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet finality that surprised even me. I said, "Good to know." My voice sounded steady, almost detached, which somehow made their laughter falter for a fraction of a second. No one responded. No one needed to. The message had already been delivered. I finished the evening like an actress trapped in a role she no longer believed in, nodding, smiling, enduring, while a storm brewed beneath the surface. I replayed the scene endlessly on the drive home, each word cutting deeper, each laugh echoing louder, until humiliation hardened into something colder, sharper, more deliberate. It wasn't about the gift. It was about the message: you don't matter. You're tolerated. You're disposable. They thought the night would end there, that I would absorb the insult like I always had. That time would dull the memory. They were wrong. Pain has a way of clarifying things, of stripping away hesitation, of revealing exactly where you stand, and what you're capable of when pushed too far. Over the next days, something like resolve took shape, quiet and patient, guided not by rage but by a chilling sense of inevitability. I didn't confront them. I didn't argue. I simply remembered. I remembered every dismissal, every slight, every carefully disguised cruelty that had accumulated over years. And while they returned to their lives, comfortably convinced the hierarchy remained intact, I began setting into motion a series of decisions they never saw coming. Because sometimes the most devastating responses are not loud explosions but silent shifts, subtle moves made far from the dinner table. 2 weeks later, they were at my door screaming, "We need to talk, open up. Please." But by then, the balance of power had already changed. And the girl they had laughed at during Christmas, dinner was no longer the one standing behind that door. 2 weeks passed, yet the echoes of that Christmas dinner never truly left me. They followed me into my mornings, lingered in the quiet moments before sleep, replayed themselves with merciless precision. But what changed during those days was not my anger. It was my clarity. Humiliation has a strange power. It burns away doubt, leaving behind something cold and focused. While they celebrated, joked, and carried on as though nothing meaningful had occurred, I made decisions. Quiet ones, permanent ones. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send emotional messages or dramatic ultimatums. I simply adjusted the pieces of my life that were still entangled with theirs. Financial ties were reviewed. Access was reconsidered. Favors I had once given without hesitation were carefully, methodically withdrawn. It wasn't revenge driven by impulse. It was distance built with intention. They had made their position unmistakably clear that night, and for the first time I chose to believe them. The morning it happened began like any other. The sky was pale, the air still. My apartment wrapped in the fragile calm of early daylight. Then came the pounding. Violent, desperate, unmistakable. Not the polite knock of a visitor, but the frantic ooter of people who had run out of options. My heart didn't race the way it once would have. Instead, a quiet certainty settled over me, the kind that arrives when you already know exactly who waits on the other side. I walked toward the door slowly, each ooter landing like a punctuation mark in a story I had already read. And then I heard it, my mother's voice, stripped of its usual authority, trembling with something I had never heard from her before. Panic. "Rosalie, please open the door." Another voice followed, my uncle's, now devoid of that familiar mocking amusement. "We need to talk." The irony was almost unbearable. The same people who had dismissed me, belittled me, laughed as though I were invisible were now standing outside my home. Voices cracking, composure shattered. I remained silent. Their words spilled into the hallway, urgent and overlapping. Fragments of explanations colliding with thinly veiled fear. Something had gone wrong, terribly wrong. The details emerged in broken pieces. A financial crisis, a deal collapsing, expectations built on assumptions that no longer held true. Assumptions about me. About what I would continue tolerating. About which doors would always remain open no matter how I was treated. My mother's tone shifted from command to pleading, from confidence to naked desperation. "Please, sweetheart. We just need a few minutes." Sweetheart. The word landed with bitter absurdity. I leaned against the wall, listening to the unraveling of people who had never imagined I would redraw the boundaries of my own existence. Because that was the part they never understood. The night of the dinner had not broken me. It had released me. Memories surged back with startling intensity. The laughter. The smirk. The cutting words delivered so casually they believed them harmless. At Christmas dinner, Mom gave everyone gifts. I got nothing. She said, "Be grateful you can sit here." My uncle chuckled and said, "Be glad we still remember your name." Everyone laughed. I said, "Good to know." Those moments now felt less like wounds and more like a turning point, a precise line dividing who I had been from who I had become. Standing there, hearing them beg, I finally grasped something that had eluded me for years. Respect cannot be negotiated with people who benefit from your silence. It only appears when your absence becomes inconvenient. The pounding grew weaker, urgency slowly draining into exhaustion. Desperation has a short lifespan when it meets an unyielding wall. "Rosalie, please." My mother's voice cracked again, smaller now, almost unrecognizable. For a fleeting second, an old instinct stirred, the reflex to comfort, to soften, to rescue them from discomfort as I had done countless times before. But clarity held firm. Compassion without boundaries is merely permission for repetition. They were not there because they suddenly understood my pain. They were there because something they needed was now beyond their reach. Eventually, the hallway fell silent. No dramatic confrontation. No raised voices. Just the fading footsteps of people forced, perhaps for the first time, to sit with the consequences of their own cruelty. I stood there long after they left, the quiet wrapping around me again, but it no longer felt fragile. It felt earned. Not victory, not triumph, something steadier and far more valuable, self-respect.